It's probably for the better we're redoing it because I was making a stupid face when we started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Lab Maniacs. I'm Dan, and I'm joined by Sigi, who is hopefully making a stupid face.
I did make a bit of a stupid face at the start.
We're bringing you another live brew. This time, we'll be featuring a different Grixis wizard, legendary creature from the Commander 2017. Not vampires. Why do I keep saying vampires? Because Jaleva's a vampire.
I don't know.
Because Jaleva's a vampire. It's a wizard. Kess, Dissident Mage, is a wizard, and she's awesome. So, we are going to try and brew her from the ground up. So, instead of taking the precon and trying to improve it to a certain budget point, we're going to just start with this blank deck you see here. Well, I say blank, but there's a Kess sitting right there. And put a budgetless competitive EDH deck together for you. So Sigi here is a bit of High Tide aficionado, and that is the direction. Spoilers, if you can't read the deck name on the top right. Top left of the top right, middle top, High Tide Kess is what we're going to be brewing. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, okay. Sigi, talk to me about High Tide.
It's a good card. So, High Tide is one of the more interesting, cards in my opinion, because rather than something like a Dark Ritual or a Cabal Ritual that provides you with extra mana one time, or two times if you have Yogg Will, High Tide, in and of itself, with a bit of support from other cards, can actually serve as a fully fledged mana engine while you're storming off.
That's pretty cool.
All you need for that... Oh yeah, it really is. All you need for that is, of course, support for it. So after we add High Tide to the deck, I think we want to start with the... probably most obvious one that's also played in Legacy High Tide decks, which is Candelabra of Tarnos.
Really? Not, High Tide?
After adding High Tide.
Okay,
Did I say that?
You did not. I don't think.
Okay, so...
Now we have High Tide and Candelabra.
Yeah, that's a good start. I mean, we've brought down our average CMC from 4 to 2. That's
Pack it up, boys. I guess we're done here.
Unfortunately, not quite. High Tide, of course, doesn't just rely on Candelabra. It also relies on us having islands. How many we want exactly is something we're going to figure out later when we know more about what else goes into the deck. First of all, there's other cards that make High Tide work really nicely. Namely, the so-called free spells from Urza's block. We've got Frantic Search, Snap, and let's add Time Spiral for now, but there is a chance we might cut it later.
Yeah, that card is really high costed. That's it's hard to make work. So let's at least block off a section for lands in here. Maybe 28, let's say. Maybe just throw in 28 islands just so we can have a rough idea of the amount of slots we have.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Cool. So with those, we've now got Candelabra to untap our islands. We've got Frantic Search, Frantic Search and Snap to untap our islands, and Time Spiral to untap our islands. So, are we also going to be looking at things that let us untap or functionally untap the Candelabra?
I think we do, yeah. So, JVP High Tide goes really hard on these types of effects because it's mono blue and it doesn't have access to many other things like that. Or like other ways to generate mana outside of bouncing candelabra. But I don't think we need that many in here. So, first of all, I think we should add the ones that can also double as interaction for our opponents, which are probably Chain of Vapor. And I guess we can add Into the Royal for now. Not sure if we're gonna keep that one. Winds of Rebuke is the third 2 CMC bounce spell option.
Are we gonna want Winds of Rebuke over something like Hurkyl's Recall that also lets us reset all our mana rocks?
You know what? You're bringing up a good point. I think we want both. Let's get Hurkyl's Recall in
say
there.
mana rocks, but we don't actually have any yet. There's also one other quite spicy candelabra resetter that you did not mention just there.
I was going to save that one for a later point, just because it's so good and I think worth talking about more in depth.
We can talk about it later then.
Good. So another spicy way to reset candelabra that can also serve as a backup win condition is Copy Artifact. We should definitely play that one.
I like it. I like it. So next question is the ways of resetting candelabra that don't also function as removal. So you mentioned Copy Artifact works there. Are we also going to add stuff like Dramatic Reversal?
Yes, Dramatic Reversal is 100% in, and along with it, we also do Isochron Scepter.
So that we can have the Copy Artifact backup win.
Indeed.
Do you want to go over what that backup win is, in case people are not familiar with it?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So, the backup win is that we have Dramatic Reversal on an Isochron Scepter to infinitely untap our stuff, make infinite mana, cast infinite spells. The other part to the backup combo is to cast Copy Artifact on our own Isochron Scepter and imprinting Swan Song on that one. What this lets us do is we can basically keep untapping both of our scepters and stacking Swan Songs on top of each other to get a bunch, or more like infinite, bird tokens, which we can then use next turn to attack everyone for infinite damage.
One of the sillier backup win cons in competitive EDH, but it's a pretty good one.
It works.
All you have to do is run like good cards that you probably ran anyways.
Yeah. There's also another backup win con with Copy Artifact that's even more like convoluted. That involves getting infinite mana with your first scepter, imprinting a bounce spell, like Winds of Rebuke, for instance, on your second scepter, and either, if it's specifically Winds of Rebuke, milling people out, or if it's another one, it involves casting DAC, plus 2ing an opponent, bouncing your own DAC, recasting it, plus 2ing again until they're milled out.
What?
Yeah, boy.
I'm reasonably certain I have never seen that come up in practice.
I'm gonna do it to you one day, don't worry. On that note, let's add Dak Faden.
I really don't want you doing that to me, Sigi. That sounds terrible.
It's gonna be great, trust me.
That sounds just awful. How do you play around people drawing interaction?
You just have more?
Isn't this... Alright, hang on. I'm not even gonna go there. Let's just move on.
If you say so.
So we have some sweet backups. We have no primary. Do we want to add an Aetherflux Reservoir so that we can have a primary win condition?
Yes, Aetherflux Reservoir is the Storm finisher of choice. and for very good reason. We definitely want that in there. So interesting point why Reservoir is actually a lot better than Tendrils is that it's much easier to do something like Adnors to, say, 5 life, play Aetherflux Reservoir, Storm up, and then cast Yogwill and another Ad Nauseam for the rest of your deck, which isn't quite as possible with Tendrils. Or let's say it's a lot more awkward.
And the whole, like, you have to cast 60 to 100 less spells in a turn to be able to kill the table. That as well. That's also relevant. So, what... I presume this means you want to add Ad Nauseam and Yawgmoth's Will, just as, like some big punches.
Without a doubt. Those are the main 2 Storm cards, if there are any. Ad Nauseam, Yawgwill. Just, if you can, don't play Storm without them.
It's not too difficult, given that they cost, like, an order of magnitude less than a lot of other fairly relevant Storm spells. So it is doable. So we've got a whole lot of mana production. Do we want to look at other spell-based mana production sources like Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual?
Oh yeah, we definitely want those too.
And are there any others you think are going to make the cut?
We do not want red rituals. We are probably not going to be running a lot of creatures, so Culling the Weak is a no. And
sure. Is there any consideration of like Muck or Rain of Filth, like those black kind of High Tides?
Honestly, I don't think we need it. High Tide is strong enough on its own, and adding something like Bubbling Muck would only further dilute our mana base, so to say.
Sure.
So I'd rather focus on the High Tide by itself. The nice part about Kess is that, similarly to Jace Vryn's Prodigy, she lets us cast double High Tide on our combo turn if that's what we want or need.
Yeah, so I like it. So we have a lot of spell-based mana production now, so let's look at some rocks. So what is just spitball, the typical ramp package from artifacts that you're going to want in this deck?
Okay, Mana Crypt, Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox, Mana Vault, definitely. Let me think. Oh yeah, Sol Ring, obviously.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. Are we gonna want Grim Monolith? Are we gonna want Voltaic Key?
Yes and yes, definitely.
Now, how about talismans and signets?
I like Talisman of Dominance.
Yeah, the good one.
And I like Dimir Signet. I also like Felwar Stone.
Yeah, yeah.
What else do we have? Izzet Signet can probably go in as well. I like it.
Helps cast Dak. That's always nice.
Yep. Rakdos Signet, I think, can stay out. Blue is probably gonna be our main color with like at least 60% of the deck. Probably closer to 70 to 75.
Yeah, those are probably good there. Are we gonna be running enough artifacts to make Mox Opal effective?
I think so. I think we're gonna end up at like around 19 to 20 artifacts, and we need to keep in mind that Copy Artifact is also going to be an artifact.
Yeah.
So Mox Opal, definitely worth it.
How about Lion's Eye Diamond and like Lotus Petal? Those kind of one-shot effects.
Yes and yes. We want both. Those are just
Seems
so
reasonable.
Incredibly good off Yogwill.
That's for sure.
I think not having them would be a mistake. Also, one thing we forgot to add earlier when we were talking about Dramatic Scepter combo, Sensei's Divining Top is an important piece for that, because it lets us draw our deck.
Yeah, that part's nice. Okay. So with those, we've got our nice little artifact ramp suite to complement our mana ramp suite. So we've got mana right now. we have win conditions right now. So let's look at, what do you want to do? Do you want to do interaction first, or do you want to do our draw suite first?
I'd say let's do tutors real quick, because those are fairly easy.
Sure.
Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, specifically for High Tide, Merchant Scroll. We want
I like it.
Limdul's Fault as well, Mystical Tutor definitely, and one card that I really like in Kess more so than most other decks, Gamble.
Gamble is pretty sweet when randomly discarding your ad nauseum is actually fine.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Is there any merit to running Entomb?
Entomb, in my opinion at least, for the Storm or High Tide version, is a bit too cute. Because if you really think about it, one of the main strengths of Kess is often being able to use the spell you tutored for twice, if you need to do that. Entomb makes it so you can only use that particular spell once. And maybe not even once if people have Graveyard Hate or something like that. So in my opinion, just going for a more solid card overall is gonna be better.
Did we get Imperial Seal on the list?
Oh, nope. Oh, I forgot about that one.
And what about Grim Tutor and maybe Praetor's Grasp, if we're looking at, like, mediocre 3-mana tutors?
No. Before we add those two, we add Dark Petition. And after that, I'm fairly sure we don't need Praetor's Grasp, and we don't need the other one, Grim Tutor.
Okay. And how about any of the transmute spells? Are those...
Nah.
Okay.
I don't think those are good in budgetless decks like this one. They are great budget replacements, but in my opinion, if you have access to the black tutors, you will often not end up needing the transmute ones. At least not in a list that's supposed to work like Storm. Because...
Makes sense.
Like, I can see transmute tutors in a deck that tries to find a very specific combo piece, like a food chain deck, for instance. It's somewhat different in a Storm deck, where you kind of pick up your pieces as you go on your Storm turn.
Yeah, that seems completely reasonable. So now we've got our tutors. Do you want to move on to cantrips? And similar size spells?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. So I've been on a bit of a Turbo Xerox trip as of late.
Yeah, you have.
So, in my opinion, there are more cEDH playable cantrips than just the usual suspects of Brainstorm, Ponder, and Preordain, all three of which we are going to be running, of course. The other two cantrips that I want to run here are Sleight of Hand and Opt. Now, Impulse we of course want as well, because it's just the best 2-mana cantrip.
So we are interested in Impulse over more Serum Visions kind of cantrips?
I don't know, I have a personal distaste for Serum Visions in this type of deck, to be honest. It's
fair enough.
I really hate how Serum Visions requires you to spend another draw on the setup it gave you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's definitely rough. It's definitely rough. Having played it in Modern, it really sucks. So are those all the cantrips we're going to be looking at? Do we want to move on to adding some of our mass draw spells?
Yeah, or like draw engines as well, because that one's probably a bit quicker.
Yeah, we'll bundle all those together.
Yeah. So draw engines, first of all, Dark Confidant. Good old Bob. Wouldn't want to live without him. And secondly, I think we're actually going to play JVP in the 99.
I like it.
Other draw engines. Mystic Remora, of course.
That is one of the better draw spells that exists in competitive EDH, and this seems like a deck that it'd be pretty good for.
Mm. Okay, let's see. Other
Time Twister?
Oh yeah, we're gonna do those in a moment. So, Necropotence. Necropotence is a bit of a weird one. Because it's incredibly good in Xur, no doubt. Simply because you basically have it in your command zone if that's what you want to do. However, from my personal experience, Necropotence in Grixis or even 4-Color Storm hasn't been as good. We just can't abuse it as well as a deck like Shimmerzer can.
Yeah, at this point, the only deck I play Necropotence in is Shimmerzer. And I don't even know if I like it in regular Doomsday Xur. Like, it's decent, but it's just not good in decks like this compared to specifically Xur. I guess it's just the consistency. And, well, the Shimmer Mirror option obviously makes Necropotence a lot stronger because the really relevant drawback doesn't exist for Shimmer lines.
Mm-hmm.
But in a deck like this, it just stinks to discard cards.
Yep.
To exile, that is.
And if you spend one of your black tutors to find a big draw card like that, it's going to be ad nauseum like 99% of the time.
That's for sure. So
okay.
I think those draw engines are fine on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Necropotence. Its day has ended.
Yeah.
Now, how about some of those mass draw spells, like you mentioned earlier?
Oh yeah, we definitely want those. So, we've got 3 usual suspects in Grixis colors, and that's Windfall, Wheel of Fortune, and Time Twister. Along with those, there's another like mini Adnors or backup win condition-ish thing that these decks usually run, and that's Notion Thief.
Yeah. That's a good one. Draw a bunch of cards, shaft somebody with Dak, laugh in the face of Brainstorm. I like it.
Oh yeah. Notion Thief is really good. Back when I hadn't played cEDH for that long, I used to think that Notion Thief was always a bit awkward, but I've really come to love that card. It's so good.
At worst, it's 1/2 of a 7-mana 2-card draw 30. At best, it's lights out for 4 mana.
Yep. Okay. Oh, one tutor spell we hadn't talked about yet. That's really interesting. Intuition.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really good with Kess.
Intuition
that's really good
with Kess. And my favorite thing about Intuition in Storm decks is if you go Intuition for 3 tutors, they have to give you 1, and you get Yorgwill on your turn, and all of a sudden you just have a graveyard with 3 black tutors on your Yorgwill turn.
Oh, that seems good. That seems very, very good.
It's crazy.
While we're adding bigger effects like that, I think there's one in particular that's close to your heart that we can also slot in at this point.
Are we going to talk about that one now?
Might as well.
Oh yeah. Paradoxical Outcome. What a card. I mean, there is a reason why a good amount of vintage players think that Paradoxical Outcome should be restricted. And let's just look at what it does for this deck. It, similarly to Hercus Recall, it bounces all mana rocks. so it ends up being mana positive on our Storm turn. It draws us cards at the same time, and it even resets Kess.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it preferentially bounces mana rocks. You can even leave your Aetherflux Reservoir out when you Paradoxical Outcome if you're going real hard mode, and just not have to worry about it, which is something that Hercules makes a little awkward.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's not necessarily as good in every Storm deck, but here, oh my god, just imagine. You're up to I don't know, 10 Storm. You've got your mana rocks on your field, you've got Kess, you've used her already. You Paradoxical Outcome, returning Kess and your mana rocks, you play them again, play Kess again, play Paradoxical Outcome from your graveyard again, play your rocks again, play Kess again, play something else with her, and all of a sudden you're up to over 30 Storm.
That's closing in on being able to make Tendrils viable again. Not that you would want to, but
Yeah.
It's a sweet card.
Another thing we forgot earlier when we talked about cantrips, obviously Gitaxian Probe.
That is a cantrip. You're right. I always forget that cards that don't cost mana work as cantrips. Gitaxian Probe is great at that.
Same.
So are we looking at any slightly smaller draw effects as well? Are we looking at any of the draw 2s like Night's Whisper and things like that? Or are we good with the cantrips and wheels and giant draw spells that we have now?
So those types of effects are usually wanted in Doomsday decks, because draw 2s let you get through your Doomsday piles nicely. However, they are somewhat less efficient than your normal cantrip, and card selection is often better than just pure card draw when you're trying to go off, or when you're trying to assemble enough resources to be able to go off. So a card like Impulse for 2 mana that sees 4 cards and only takes 1 will often do us better than a card that draws 2 cards for 2 mana but only sees those 2 cards.
And does that include not cards like specifically Gush for the ability to potentially reset islands if you're not making your land drops on your combo turn or on other turns?
I think making land drops on the combo turn is probably going to be the least of our concerns, TBH.
Seems reasonable.
And Gush is really, really bad off ad nauseum.
Yeah, that part hurts. So I guess Gush is probably out.
Yeah.
Card.
No Gush. And along that line, no Lab Maniac, no Doomsday. I don't think the deck will need it.
Yeah, this seems to be shaping up into a pretty streamlined pure Storm list.
Yep.
I think next up we can take a look at our interaction suite.
Seems good.
Having already added a couple in Swan Song and some of the offensive and defensive bounce spells. So do you want to start with our counterspells?
Okay, let's do it. Number 1, Mana Drain. Number 2, Force of Will. Number 3, Pact of Negation. Number 4, Flusterstorm. Should I just continue down the list, or...?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay. Where were we? Number 4, Flusterstorm, right?
Yeah.
Then we've got... number 5, Mental Misstep. Number 6, Actual Literal Counterspell. Number 7, Delay. Number 8, Dispel. I really like Dispel right now, because Flash Hulk is a thing. And
that's for sure.
1 mana counterspells are great right now. Number 8 or 9, whichever one we're on, Spell Pierce. Number 9 or 10, Pyroblast.
I like it. Are we going to add both, or are we just going to add the Play Anywhere one?
Just Pyroblast is fine, I think. We have enough of a counter
So
spell
that's
density.
10 counterspells plus the Swan Song? Or is that 10 including Swan Song? I think that
that's
puts us at 11.
Yeah,
Yeah. Awesome.
that's
11
a really good number.
counterspells is a robust counterspell suite.
Yep.
Now, are there any bounce spells we're missing, or removal in general that we're missing?
So this one is more of a meta call than people might expect, but looking at the current meta, I think Cyclonic Rift is a card that's worth including, even if it goes against the rule of thumb of High Tide that every bounce spell we play should be able to bounce their own Candelabra.
Yeah, there are so many positions in the current Hate Bears metas where you're just going to end up in a position where you can win if you could overload a Cyclonic Rift on the end step.
Yep.
And not having that option is hard. And I think you've lost games on stream in that exact position.
Yes, I have.
You
bad.
probably swore to yourself to always include Counterspell, or not Counterspell, Cyclonic Rift at that point, didn't you?
Yeah. I am not playing this deck without Cyclonic Rift, sorry.
Oh, good.
If you, dear viewer, want to do it, you're more than welcome to, but I won't.
And is there any other removal that we want to add? Do we want to look at stuff like Lightning Bolt? Do we want to look at stuff like Izzet Signet? Do we want to look at stuff like Toxic Deluge?
Yeah, for sure. So, the ones that are worth considering, in my opinion, are Toxic Deluge, Fire Covenant, and Rolling Earthquake.
Those all seem like pretty good solid adds.
Yeah, and then we can add spot removal, like Pongify. Let's just toss it in for now, and we can come back to it later. It's decent.
Seems good. Do we want to add the lizard one, or do we just want one turn to monkey effect?
We're probably going to cut at least one, but we can add both for now. Should be fine.
Okay. What about what is it? Gilded Drake. Do we want stuff to be able to steal? No, not worth it.
No.
I guess there's
definitely not
a whole lot that's going to come up that we would want to keep on board and have.
Yeah. Like we are not the kind of deck that deals with threats like Yisan, Arkham, or Selvala by ways of stealing them.
That makes sense. Last question before I think we start moving towards the last couple of cuts and our mana base. Do you want to consider a card like Paradox Engine for this deck?
I knew you were going to ask that. No, honestly, I don't. The reason being, Paradox Engine serves two big functions, usually. One, it creates a simple, strong mana advantage, which, considering that we are able to double High Tide, we probably don't need. The second function of Paradox Engine is that it creates another Isochron Scepter win con, with Isochron Scepter, a repeatable spell underneath it, and Paradox Engine itself. However, we already have another Isochron Scepter backup win con with Copy Artifact. And Copy Artifact is also more synergistic with our High Tide plan.
Those are good reasons.
I also noticed we forgot one of the most important cards in a classic Storm deck like this. Mind's Desire.
Eidolon of Rhetoric. Oh.
You tried.
All right. I was close. Mind's Desire seems really good on Storm turns off a Kess after you double do the paradoxical thing. I like that. Cast the rest of your deck for free.
Mm-hmm.
I can dig it. That's pretty good.
You can even go like do the Mind's Desires the first time somewhere in the middle, then do your paradoxical stuff, and then come back to a Mind's Desire for, I don't know, 50?
Oh. I bet that ends games.
Oh, yeah.
With the addition of Mind's Desire, that puts us at 103 cards and an average CMC of 1.91.
We can do better. Also, two more cards
better.
I think we want to add that at least have played very well for me in other Storm decks are Baral, Chief of Compliance, especially considering that we're running 11 counterspells.
Oh, yeah.
And Helm of Awakening.
Oh, yeah. That one's great in Shimmer, sir.
I bet it is.
So with those two ads, we'll be hanging out at 105 cards. Do you think this is the time where, Time Spiral comes out?
Yes.
Because that card is pretty dead frequently in decks I've played.
Mm-hmm. So, it starts being mana positive once you have 4 lands on a normal High Tide turn, and once you have 3 lands on a double High Tide turn. However, it's getting to those 6 mana available can be really awkward, even with like good mana rock support and so on.
Makes sense. Are cards like what's the other one? In terms of like netting mana off your lands, Turnabout? Is Turnabout at all worth considering?
Dramatic Reversal is basically the better version of Turnabout. So
yeah, just because of Candelabra interactions? That makes sense.
Yeah.
Turnabout is pretty thick. 4 mana is rough.
Yeah, and double blue, I mean, while we are a High Tide deck, double blue is not the best thing in the world.
Yeah. Okay, so Time Spiral, that puts us at 104 cards, I believe.
Yeah.
Where are we looking to trim now? Do you think we need both of those? I really don't think both of the removal spells that we added. Where are they? Oh, we didn't add Rapid Hybridization. We just added Pongify. We probably do want one. Do we still want Winds of Rebuke if we added Cyclonic Rift?
So, I like Winds of Rebuke over Into the Royal. I think Into the Royal can go.
Sure. I guess milling is less of a downside for us, and it can incidentally mess with top deck tutors.
Yeah. And it serves as an easy backup win condition with the copy artifact if we can't do Swan Song.
Makes sense. Where else are we looking to trim? Is a card like Hercules still worth it?
Yeah, I think so. Hercules is insane. I don't think we need Fire Covenant, Rolling Earthquake, and Toxic Deluge. And out of those 3, I either like Fire Covenant. I think I like Fire Covenant the least, first of all, because black and red is gonna be awkward, even if it's instant speed. And it costs a lot of life if we need to blow up multiple targets.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. So that brings us down to 102 before... Well, 102. And then mana-based tweaks. Where else do you think we could cut?
I'm not sure if I like having Pongify at all.
Yeah, 3/3 is a bit big. And while Kess can block it profitably, if we have to Pongify early, we may take a lot of damage.
Yeah, and we can usually handle most things with our bounce spells. That, if we need it, we can even use twice with Kess.
Sure. Let's get that out of there. One more cut, and then we will lay down some sick mana. Do we cut one of the worst cantrips?
Nah. Those can stay.
Do we cut Merchant Scroll?
Merchant Scroll is... If you can get Paradoxical Outcome with Merchant Scroll,
that
card is incredible.
Just kidding.
How many lands do we have right now? 28. Okay.
28.
That's probably right.
Yeah, 1.85. We shouldn't go down any farther. Is Jace or Dark Confidant too slow for this deck?
It's not, in my opinion. Because, like, the basic philosophy of Storm is that you want to go off at the latest reasonable point in the game when you've been able to amass the most resources before your opponents are able to overwhelm you.
That makes sense.
So having some of these slower but strong card advantage engines is very good. Now, for the last card that we can cut, I think we, as you said earlier, either look towards our worst cantrip, which is either Opt or Sleight of Hand, or we cut another board wipe. I'd personally probably cut Toxic Deluge because Cyclonic Rift is also a board wipe.
Sure, that makes sense. So let's cut that, and that'll bring us down to 100 cards.
Yep.
So let's push a mana base in there.
Sounds good.
So we have 28 lands. Let's start off. Underground Sea, Volcanic Island, Watery Grave, Steam Vents.
Yep. And even if it's awkward, Badlands is fine to run.
Yeah, that tends to happen.
It's like a necessary evil, basically.
Yeah. Then we have our fetches, which I can never get right in any particular order.
Let me help you. Arid Mesa, Bloodstained Mire, Flooded Strand, Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, Polluted Delta, Scalding Tarn, Verdant Catacombs, Wooded Foothills.
Nice.
I think that's all of them.
Yeah. And then we have, Command Tower, we have Mana Confluence, we have City of Brass.
Yeah, I like all of those.
Do we play either Orchard?
Nope. We don't need that one.
Makes sense. Just straight on to, basics at this point? How many lands is that?
Let me think. So we don't want Urborg. I think Urborg is not a good land.
It's bad.
We obviously don't want Cabal Coffers either.
No.
We've talked about Badlands. Yeah, I think we've got basics left now. So
cool.
We don't need mountains, because we get those if somebody plays Blood Moon. Yeah. And we don't have a lot of stuff we need to cast off red under a Blood Moon.
So yeah, the usual one swamp and the balance islands.
Yeah. Anything?
Yeah, so 28 lands, we're at 45, so that'd be 46. So that would give us how many islands? Math is hard.
46, 28. Yeah, it should be 10 islands, I think.
10 islands?
Yeah.
Cool. So we have 100 cards. We have a functional High Tide mana base. We have an average CMC of 1.83.
Yeah.
I like the way this looks.
So do I.
Any thoughts overall on how this is going to play out before we close out?
One thing I do want to mention is that other cards that are worth considering that we've omitted right now are Vandal Blast and Bifrost. If those are something you feel you need, you can do the same thing as we did with Toxic Deluge just now. You can cut Opt or Sleight of Hand for them if you really want to. Overall, this list looks good, I think. I like it. That's how I'd play it.
Yeah, and I believe you will be taking this for a test ride in an probably upcoming, but, release schedules are hard, so maybe prior coming, uncoming, back coming, gameplay video. where I'll
Yes.
be playing that Inala Reanimator deck.
Yeah.
So
I hope it's gonna
overall,
be good.
I think it'll be a fun deck to watch in action. So thank you, Sigi, for helping me, and by helping me I mean brewing the High Tide Kess deck. And thank you all for watching. This has been another live brew by the Lab Maniacs, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.